Welcome back to Beyond Classified. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Tonight, I want to welcome Deborah Tavares. She's a third-generation land developer of residential construction and has been self-employed in a family-operated business for over 30 years. She specializes in land feasibility studies, acquisitions, and building permit processes, including required environmental impact reports, along with furnishing Department of Real Estate subdivision requirements and the entire construction build-out to completion. It was during this process that the restrictions of property rights became evident under the creeping constraints of the United Nations Agenda 21 through land use limitations, restrictions, regulations, fees, and increased liability exposures. She exposes the connections between global trends of man-made and corporate military-controlled technologies, weaponized frequencies, and other major programs intended to cause damage to health and reduce the population and to eliminate our freedom. Deborah, welcome back. How are you doing tonight?
Well, Chris, thank you very much. As everyone may know, I'm here in Northern California, about an hour north of the Golden Gate Bridge. And today is February the 1st, and it is 2021. And I want to do some updates, and then I want to talk about what we are going to face next along with the coronavirus. So
definitely.
This is a deadly conversation. I'm sorry, Chris. Yes?
No, that's okay. Before we get to that, I just wanted to mention, we have entered an extremely critical time. The agendas keep coming at us extremely fast, and we haven't even seen or felt the magnitude of what is really occurring or what's even occurred yet. And I know you have a lot to cover tonight when it comes to the actual documentation. Basically, it's what I consider a war on humanity. Lockdowns, mask mandates, double masking, small businesses are being destroyed, and now we have this experimental RNA monstrosity that they're trying to mandate to people. It's claiming lives every day, has thousands and thousands of adverse side effects. And like you mentioned, you're still in California, right?
I am.
And how are things there right now?
Well, it's just like the rest of the country. We've been very heavily chemtrailed, as we always are. We're breathing in horrific amounts of different types of biological sprayed hazards overhead, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But they want us dead. They are the controlling minorities of the world, the international bankers, the families. We've talked about that in many prior videos, so I'm not going to go into depth in that right now. I did just release a video today. I would ask that everybody please listen to it. I go into more detail about what has happened to this country, what kind of government we really have, why the whole QAnon CIA operation was an operation to continue to distract us to the extent of what we realize our government really is. The name of the video that's posted today on stopthecrime.net, the YouTube video channel, is called Data and Reality Hidden. Do not tell the people. So at this point, I would like to ask everyone to subscribe to stopthecrime.net and to our YouTube video channel, and be sure to click the bell notifications so you are notified whenever we post new videos or whenever we send out email blast outs. And we are getting ready to send out an email blast out shortly, so you'll be the recipient of that before you may hear it on the radio. So Chris, with that having been said, the assaults, as you said, it's an avalanche. It is just an avalanche, and it just keeps coming. I want to remind everybody what the documents are saying and what the controlling factions of this global worldwide conspiracy upon all of us is doing. And I found this in this document. It was very, it was horrific. It really did, I think, underscore what the intention is, and of course that is to move us off of all real estate. And I found in a document from the Department of Defense, it was a 2014 Climate Action Adoption Roadmap, and it talked about many things, but one of the things that really was unnerving, and I'm hunting for it right now, is what they said specifically about needing us off all the land worldwide. All the people must be removed from the land. This is death. This is what we've been told in the World Economic Summit, that we won't own anything. And that is the plan, to not own anything. So if they're destroying and taking and stealing, they have to murder along the way, or there will be a huge revolt. And I'm hunting for that right now. But I will remind you that we have been told time and time again that land cannot be treated as an ordinary asset controlled by us and subject to the pressures and influences of the marketplace. And land ownership is also a principal instrument of accumulation and centralization of wealth, therefore contributes to social injustice. And this is from the United Nations Habitat Conference in 1976. So I can only say that what we face is so horrific and so barbaric, evil, and intended to destroy us as individuals and our animals, that most people cannot believe this is true. So let me tell you what I found in this document. It's entitled Artificial Land. Well, the portion in the article is entitled Artificial Land Cover. It talks about everything that we humans have created is considered artificial land cover. Artificial land cover, the definition as they describe it, means it causes loss of land resources for agricultural and for natural areas by sealing off the ground. It can accumulate stormwater runoff and accelerate stormwater runoff and vulnerability to flooding. It also has an impact on biodiversity. Now, when you see this being said in documents by the World Bank and out of the French climate control documents, you have to realize that in order to eliminate people, you have to kill them. And we're watching that occurring right now. People are just not aware that this is really happening, that this could really happen. Chris, when I hear myself say this, it's hard to really believe, although the evidence is occurring in real time right now, and it has been. So I'm going to start this conversation because I really do have some important information that leads into what the next overriding cause of death will be beyond COVID-19. And I want to get into that, but I want to preface a few things before I do. First, I want everybody to remember something about the vaccination program, that the science has always been unsettled. And you can read some very important documents and information about the health hazards of disease prevention and deadly immunity by Robert Kennedy Jr. And also another book called Science for Sale by Dr. David Lewis. I highly recommend that everyone take a look at this. It's also very important to also know that the Harvard study concludes safe and effective drugs are a myth. We're told back in 2013, a Harvard study exposed the epidemic corruption of government agencies due to the big pharma influence and money. And you can see institutional corruption of pharmaceuticals and the myth of safe and effective drugs. You can just type that in again, institutional corruption of pharmaceuticals and the myth of safe and effective drugs. And also that all participating in vaccination programs are exempted from liability. We're going to read more about that in a moment with other kinds of assaults that we all now face at an increasing level. Also that patients and parents are never given full disclosure. They're never given the vaccine inserts to justify, and which discusses what the vaccine hides and the truth that is hidden by their health effects, and including seizures and denying parents full disclosure. And that is in a document AAP's refusal to vaccinate document.
Well, this isn't even
Also,
really considered technically a vaccine. It's like some sort of strange gene therapy, RNA
oh,
experiment.
it's not an experiment. They don't need to experiment. They know exactly what they're aiming to do. Experimentation was long ago over. They're exterminating people by a variety of different means. And yes, I do understand that many are considering that it is not a vaccine, that it is literally a gene altering injection foretold to us, leading us into the transhumanism agenda. But also, it's important to note that the CDC is a private, for-profit corporation doing business, and it is not a government health advocacy organization. Its corporation is listed on Dun & Bradstreet and is headquartered in the state of Georgia, with strong ties to the pharmaceutical industry. Therefore, the recommendations of the CDC are influenced by their fiscal health of their corporation, which is in fact distributing vaccines. It's also important to note that even our public health institutions are private, for-profit corporations doing business. And medical clinic records are, of course, frequently reviewed by state public health departments, which are also for-profit corporations listed on Dun & Bradstreet. Even the American Academy of Pediatrics is a for-profit corporation doing business. And physicians get more money for each fully vaccinated child. We know that. And profits, not science, motivate the vaccine mandates. Now, we all know that. But what you may not know, and something I discovered a number of years ago in the NASA War document, which I'm going to go over briefly at this time, I had read about Operation Sea Spray, SEA Spray, Operation Sea Spray. And what I found out was shocking to me at that time, but it was an operation conducted in the fog over San Francisco in the mid-50s. And they were spraying bacterial agents that caused different types of uterus infections for women. And it was a large human experiment. It was one of the largest in the history, and it was conducted on unsuspecting residents, again, in San Francisco. And many people did not know what fog has been used for. Fog has been used to hide dispersions of using chemicals and biologicals in many hundreds of areas, not only over the United States itself, but elsewhere worldwide. So what we learned about that in the 1950s is that the U.S. military conducted a test to see whether it could be used to help spread a biological weapon, and they called it a simulated germ warfare attack. And this was just the start of many tests around the country that would go on in secret for many, many years. And they claimed that the test was a success. And Rebecca Kristen explained over on a Discovery magazine, in a Discovery magazine, it was one of the largest human experiments in history. But she also said that it was one of the largest offenses of the Nuremberg Code since inception. The code stipulates that voluntary informed consent is required. Now, I want to stop here. We're not run by the Nuremberg Code. We are not run by what we consider law and justice. We're not run by a medical organization that is anything other than set up by Rothschild and Rockefeller to destroy us and many other families as well. We're set up to be abused and used and poisoned and to be eliminated slowly in ways of plausible deniability. What I learned about Operation Sea Spray out of the document was very wrenching for me at the time, because there was a death that occurred then, and this man had been recovering from prostate surgery when he suddenly fell ill with severe urinary tract infection. So that's the bacteria that was sprayed over San Francisco. And the bacteria had reportedly never been found in any hospitals before and was rare in the Bay Area and California in general. And the grandson of the man who died in 1950 tried to sue the government for wrongful death, but the court held that the government was immune to a lawsuit for negligence and that they were justified in conducting tests without subjects' knowledge. So it's important to understand that we aren't working within a system that people believe. And they go on to talk about that back in 2005, the FDA stated that the bacteria can cause serious life-threatening illnesses. That was the bacteria in Operation Sea Spray in patients with compromised immune systems. That the bacteria had shown up in a few other ways across the Bay Area health and had presented a crisis since the 1950s, according to the San Francisco Chronicle, leading to some speculation that the original spraying could have established a new microbiological population in the area. And while the grandson of his father who was deceased, or his grandfather who was deceased, lost his lawsuit, he said afterwards, as quoted by Cole, C-O-L-E, he's an author, and I'm going to give you the name of his book in a moment. He said, "At least we are all aware of what can happen, even in this country. I just hope this story won't be forgotten." So I told you this story so that you will not forget what has happened and what we now need to understand what is planned for us now. Now, the book that I mentioned is entitled Clouds of Secrecy, and it's about the Army's germ warfare test over populated areas. Again, the book is entitled Clouds of Secrecy, and it's in paperback, was presented on January 1st of 1990. The author is Leonard A. Cole, C-O-L-E. You all need to understand the level and the use of what they're doing in the overhead aerosol spraying program. Now, just a little bit more about how this operation worked is very important to understand. They used military aircraft with hoses to spray San Francisco in the fog so that this bacteria would spread. And again, these are terror attacks. So we're going to talk more about what we face, because we do face more of what we already realize that we face, because we're in massive medical and biological attacks, and everyone needs to clearly understand this. At this point, I'm going to go a little bit into the NASA War document. You can find it on stopthecrime.net and just type in the search bar NASA War Plan, or you can just type in NASA War Plan in your search bar, NASA War Plan, Deborah Tavares. I have spoken about this plan for many, many years. You'll find lots of interviews pop up, and I am sending out an emergency email blast out, which will also include the link for the plan itself. But I'm going to go over some of what all of you need to be very much aware of, and why you're going to need to definitely consider looking at how you reduce fungus and bacteria and other organisms and parasites and carcinogens in your body. I know that there are many preppers talking about prepping against power outages, which everyone needs to do, against the reduced food supply, which of course you do need to look at preparing to survive against that, because of course altering the sun, as we have seen, is reducing the food supply, many aspects of reducing the food supply. But in the NASA War document on page 51, it says often fingerprintless and not shock and awe. They talk about bacteriological funguses and prions and parasites and fungi and carcinogens, toxins, and hormone regulators. They also talk about many other things, and I'm going to start to go over some of what I have been researching right now. One of the last things I just found besides all of the other intentional attacks, was the intentional attacks of the fires, the arson fires that we have all been experiencing that are done by those in control. Again, here in Northern California, I have a video up. Uh, in 2015, I was standing before the County Board of Supervisors talking about the planned attack in Northern California fires, and it's called, um, um, oh gosh, what do I call it? Northern California fires, I believe. Anyway, it has many, many views. I was discussing the information that I had discovered at that time, and it all came to pass. So they're talking about the effects of wildfire smoke. I've done many interviews on that. I have many of those discussions and information on stopthecrime.net on our video YouTube channel as well. But it's important to understand that the smoke, wherever you are, is coming down on you. It's filtering through the air. It's billowing plumes of smoke that rise on waves of heat during the day and sink into valleys at night as it cools. And it's transporting countless living microbes that can seep into our lungs and cling onto our skin and clothing. And this is according to research published recently in Science. In some cases, researchers fear that the airborne pathogens could sicken firefighters or downwind residents. And we know that in 2017, 2018, and 2019, and that California has burned across that wildfires have burned across more than 2 million acres in the United States in 2020. Federal statistics show including some 4.2 million acres in California, where a greater number of residents have been exposed. That would include me. Aerosolized microbes, spores of fungi, and candida have the potential to travel hundreds of miles depending on the behavior and atmospheric conditions, which, by the way, they create. And they're eventually deposited or inhaled downwind of the fire. And this is an article that appeared in the Los Angeles Times today, February 1st of 2021. They're setting us up for a mass attack of viruses. So let me go into this a little bit further so that all of you can think about what things you might consider doing now in advance of a full-on bore assault, which is getting ready to be unleashed on us.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's important for people to know just the massive scope of this, that all these things you're talking about are connected and they serve a purpose for these controllers in power. Like you're saying, the spraying, the fires, one thing leads to another, and it's all connected in one big massive operation. And I think people need to really realize the scope of this and how it is really us against them, this 1% of psychopaths that are controlling everything.
They've infiltrated every level of government, and that's what I do discuss in the video that people can see, again, entitled Data and Reality Hidden. Do not tell the people. And I do discuss that in more depth, Chris, so that people can refer to that, because I'm going to stay on this attack right now for a moment or two.